Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for another tier list. Today we're going to be going through the discography of Sigur Rós, one of the legendary groups to come out of Iceland, and a band that I've been a fan of for quite some time now. I started listening to them back in college about 15 years ago, and I've kept up with all of their work since then, and have also seen them live, and I have always found their music to just be exceptionally beautiful. It really has this amazing ability to just transport you into another world and wash you away in whatever emotion they are trying to convey. And as a guitar player, I really appreciate what they are able to achieve sonically between their use of effects and the bowed guitar, which is a very unorthodox approach to guitar playing and a staple of the Sigur Rós sound. And all of those elements combined with Jónsi's beautiful vocal timbre and exceptionally pretty sense of melody makes for some of the most beautiful music of the past 25 years in my opinion. So I'm glad to be covering them for today's episode. So what I'm going to do is go through their 8 studio albums, starting with Von and going up to Átta. And I should clarify that I'm only going to pronounce the Icelandic album titles if I think I can pronounce them, but if not, I'll just do the English translations. So I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations, but I definitely do not speak Icelandic. And also, as I'm going through these records and naming my favorite songs, I will most likely just be giving you the track number or the English translation, so I don't have to attempt to pronounce any of these. So just wanted to get that out of the way up front. But I will go through Von all the way up to Átta, and I will score each of them on this tier list, with S being the highest and D being the lowest, and I'll talk a little bit about each album, let you know my thoughts, and we will see where we end up. And please feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments, where you agree and disagree, and how you would rank these 8 albums. I would love to hear your thoughts. Alright, I think that's about it. Let's jump right into it. Okay, starting out, we have their debut studio album from 1997 titled Von. And unfortunately, I'm going to give this a D. This is the one album of their discography that I really struggle with, and most other people do agree. This is widely regarded to be their worst record, but every once in a while, you do get somebody that holds it in high regard, and I think an album like this is only going to appeal to a very specific type of music listener, as it doesn't have much resemblance to the sounds that they would explore for the remainder of their discography, with this one being much more within the ambient, avant-garde, minimalist, droney sort of realm, with lots of songs that I personally find to be a bit challenging to get through. And for me, the only redeeming quality is that there are a couple of tracks where you get little glimpses of what they would do for the remainder of their discography, and that does make for a couple of tracks that I find more enjoyable. But at the same time, I wouldn't say any of these tracks reach the same highs that any of their future material would. But I will say I do really enjoy track 5, Darkness. That is probably the most normal sounding song on the album and gives us some very nice dream pop vibes, which I do appreciate. I would say we also get some similar shoegaze dream pop vibes on track 3, Mother Earth. And other than that, the only other songs I find tolerable on here would be track 9, the title track, as well as track 11, Sins of God. But again, I don't think any of these songs are anywhere near as good as the material that they would do from the next album and onward. And despite these couple of songs that I think are okay, the remainder of the album is just such a challenge to get through, and it really bears such little resemblance to that classic Sigur Rós sound that we all know and love, so I can't justify putting this anywhere else other than the D tier, unfortunately. But luckily, this is my least favorite Sigur Rós album, so after this we are only going to go up, but I would say a pretty weak debut record, unfortunately, so this one's going to get a D. Okay, next we have their second studio album from 1999, which translates to A Good Beginning. I'm not even going to attempt the Icelandic pronunciation, but I will give this an S. This is a spectacular and very beautiful record. This goes down as my second favorite Sigur Rós album, and in my opinion, this is one of the most significant improvements that any band has made from their first to second record. It really sounds like a whole new group, and the quality of the music on here is just off the charts. On this record, we're changing gears with the sound, and we get this beautiful stylistic blend of post-rock, chamber pop, ambient, and even some dream pop and shoegazy elements. and this is the first example of that classic Sigur Rós sound coming to fruition, and they would continue to build off of this on subsequent records. It's 10 tracks long, and most of these songs range anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes in length. Instrumentally, we get the guitar, bass, drum, and keyboard hybrid, which is sort of the foundation of the Sigur Rós lineup, but we also get the addition of a beautiful string section, as well as some other instruments popping up here and there like flute, trumpet, and trombone, among others. And these added instruments really do a great job of taking these already beautiful songs and making them come to life even more. I enjoy every song in this track listing, and it does contain 2 songs that would make my top 10 favorite Sigur Rós song list, with tracks 2 and 3, which translate to Sleepwalking Angels and Staring Elf. And some other favorites would be track 8, Olsen Olsen, and track 5, New Batteries, which has some truly haunting vocal melodies and just an overall very dark atmosphere that I love so much, and I think it provides a nice little detour in the mood throughout the track listing. So those would be my favorite tracks, but like I said, I do not think there is one bad song on here, and I think it is such a step up from the previous release and really defined that Sigur Rós sound that we all know and love, and was the foundation point for so many great records to follow. So an incredible record, my second favorite Sigur Rós album. This one gets an easy S. Okay, moving on, we have their third studio album from 2002, which I've always referred to as the Parentheses album, but according to Wikipedia, it's also known as the Bracket album, which I was not aware of, but I will also give this an S. Another spectacular record. This one goes down as my third favorite Sigur Rós album, and it's a very nice follow-up to the previous release with a lot of interesting components to it. This is the first album where Jónsi would sing in a made-up language titled Hopelandic, and the album has 8 untitled tracks which are split in half, with the first 4 being more hopeful and optimistic, and the second half gets more desolate and melancholy. And stylistically, it does share some similarities to the previous release, with the post-punk and ambient qualities, with these really long songs that take their time and build and have these really nice crescendos. And again, we see the addition of the string section, which adds an additional layer of depth and beauty to these already exceptionally beautiful songs. In terms of the songs, I think every track on here is incredible, with so many beautiful textures and melodies, with an amazing use of dynamics. My personal favorites would be Untitled number 1 and Untitled number 3. Untitled number 1 is hands down my favorite opening track of any Sigur Rós album. Talk about a song that just completely takes you into another dimension. Definitely a very meditative song for me, and it's been very helpful over the years in terms of just being a track that can always get me grounded. And the same can be said of Untitled number 3. Those piano and string parts are just absolutely gorgeous, and when they finally reach that climax in the dynamics, it just feels so satisfying. So those would be my 2 personal favorites, which both happen on side 1, and if I had to pick a favorite from side 2, I would go with the closer, Untitled number 8. That song has a really great intensity and drive to it, which again builds and crescendos perfectly, and I really like how they conclude the album with that sort of energy, and I think it contrasts Untitled number 1 very nicely. So just another amazing album, and a truly beautiful and meditative experience listening to this 71 minutes of music all the way through. And like I said, it goes down as my third favorite Sigur Rós album. So another one that is going to get an easy S. Okay, next we have their fourth studio album from 2005 titled Takk. And again, I'm going to give this one an S. Another spectacular record, and for me, this one goes down as my favorite Sigur Rós album. To me, this is just peak levels of the beautiful, euphoric atmospheres that they create. I think from beginning to end, this album is an absolutely gorgeous and surreal experience. It's 11 tracks long, and similar to the 2 previous releases, we're still getting a lot of longer tracks that really take their time and build, but we do get a couple of songs that are on the shorter side, at at least by Sigur Rós standards, with a couple of songs that range between that 4 and 5.5 minute mark, which is a little precursor to a direction that they are going to explore more on their next record. And again, we have the addition of a beautiful string section, as well as some brass instruments and a choir, which appears on track 3. And they do a really great job of just taking you through the full spectrum of different emotions that their music elicits, with a good handful of songs that sound very triumphant and hopeful, with some cinematic qualities to them, but also songs that contrast those moods and go into some sadder territories. And to me, the way they constructed these songs was very effective. If I was going to recommend a Sigur Rós album to a first-time listener, this is the one I would go with, because it contains all of the elements that are the core of their sound, but does give you a nice blend of different songs, with some that are on the longer side and have those classic builds and crescendos, but also a few tracks that are on the shorter side, which in my opinion could be more appealing and less jarring to a casual music listener who might want to explore Sigur Rós. So in my opinion, it's very effective on those fronts. It's also one of 2 albums in their discography that contain the largest amount of my favorite Sigur Rós songs, with 3 songs on here making my top 10 favorite song list, which are tracks 3, 6, and 7, which translate to Hopping Into Puddles, Lost at Sea, and Milan. And in addition to those, my other favorites would be track 5, I See a Train, and track 8, titled Gong. But all in all, I think from front to back, this album is spectacular. I think the previous 2 albums were also incredible, but to me, this is really their magnum opus, which showcases all of the best sides of their songwriting. So I cannot say enough good things about this record. This is my personal favorite Sigur Rós album. This one gets an easy S. Okay, moving on, we have their 5th studio album from 2008, which translates to With a Buzz in Our Ears, We Play Endlessly. And I will give this an A. I think this is a very good album. I wouldn't say I like it as much as the previous 3 releases, but it's still a very strong record regardless. Stylistically, this album is the biggest shift that we've heard up to this point, with the exception of going from the first to the second album. On here, they do veer off from the more stretched out, ethereal, dreamy, and ambient stylings of the prior releases, and this one features more tracks on the shorter side, with some more indie and folk rock influences popping up, and the acoustic guitars are becoming more prevalent, and we have more of an emphasis on the drums. Definitely their most drum-heavy album to date, and I think it was a very effective time in their discography to make that transition, and I think they did it very well. The album is 11 tracks long, and I think the majority of the songs on here are great, but it does have about 2 or 3 tracks that I wouldn't say are my favorites, and that is ultimately why I put it in A tier rather than S. But I do think about 85% of this album is spectacular. My favorite song on here by far would be song 2, which translates to Within Me, a Lunatic Sings, and that would also make my top 10 favorite Sigur Rós track list. And a couple of other standouts for me would be song 1, Gobbledygook, as well as track 4, We Play Endlessly. And I also enjoy track 9, which has no translation. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that one. And track 7, Rowboat. And I definitely think that this album does reach the same highs and has the same levels of beauty that the previous 3 records did. The only difference, like I said, is that it does have a couple of tracks that I'm not crazy about, but I still think it's a very strong album nonetheless, and a welcomed change up in pace and style at this point in their discography. So a very good album. I will give this an A. Okay, moving on, we have their 6th studio album from 2012 titled Valtari, and I will give this an A. I think this is a fantastic record. I've noticed a lot of people rank this lower in their discography, and I've never understood what people could dislike about this record. To me, this album contains some of Sigur Rós's most beautiful tracks of their entire discography. At the same time, though, with that said, I also don't think that this album is without its faults, which is why I did put it in A tier, but I do think the overwhelming majority of this album is incredible. After the more adventurous shift of the previous record, we see a return to more of a typical dreamy ambient soundscape on here, with lots of very delicate and beautiful atmospheres and melodies within this 8-song track listing. And I think the vocal melodies on here are some of Jonsi's most beautiful melodies to date, with 3 songs on here making my top 10 Sigur Rós track list, which is a tie with Takk for most songs from one album on that list. And those songs would be track 3, Caution, as well as track 2, Not a Sound, and the closing track, 4 pianos. Believe it or not, Caution is my number 1 favorite Sigur Rós song. I've always really loved the vocal melodies so much on that one, and the way they build and climax with the strings is just absolutely breathtaking in my opinion. And I've never heard anyone else have this track as their favorite Sigur Rós song, so I'm curious if anyone else agrees with me. Let me know in the comments. And Not a Sound has similar vocal melodies that are just so pretty, and the atmosphere of that track just washes you away into another world. And 4 Pianos is a track that I find to be deeply meditative, just a very simple but really pretty piano melody that continues to layer itself over the course of almost 8 minutes, and I think it's the perfect way to conclude this record. Now, with all of that positive stuff said, there is a track or two on here that aren't my favorites of their discography, and that's the only reason why I put this in A tier, but I think people that hate on this album really need to give it another chance, because this might be the Sigur Rós record that I go back and listen to the most, and I just skip over the couple of tracks that I'm not crazy about and just absolutely love the rest. So an amazing album with a couple of minor critiques that bump it down 1 tier for me. So I will give this an A. Okay, next we have their 7th studio album from 2013 titled Kveikur, and I will give this a B. This is a very interesting album for me because there are a lot of things about it that I love, and when I first heard it, I was really into it, but I did find that over time, as I listened to it more and more, my interest in it did seem to diminish a little bit, but there still are some great qualities to it. Similar to the 5th album, we hear some more explorations stylistically, with this record being their heaviest and most aggressive to date, with the inclusion of some distorted bass and some industrial elements on select tracks, but also containing the core elements to their sound as well. This record is 9 tracks long, and for me, I really enjoy 6 of the songs on here, and then the other 3 fall a little flat for me, and is why I put it in B tier. As far as favorites on here go, my number 1 by far would be track 7, Electrical Current. I think that song is absolutely beautiful, and some other standouts would be the opener, Brimstone, which is probably the heaviest track on here, and a super badass way to kickstart this record. And I also really enjoyed Storm, Iceberg, and the closer Was/Shelter, which is a similar closer to Valtari in the sense that it's a piano track, but this one takes on some darker tones and fits the aesthetic of this album very well. The couple of tracks I could do without are Surface, the title track, and Blue Thread, so still a good album and some really beautiful moments, but I wouldn't say I resonate with this one quite as much as the stuff in S and A tier, and like I said, my admiration for it has dwindled a bit over time in comparison to the other records, but still good regardless, so I will give this a B. Okay, and lastly, we have their 8th and most recent studio album from 2023 titled Átta, and I will give this a B. I know some people are going to disagree with this scoring because lots of people hold this album in very high regard, and in all honesty, this was the hardest record for me to score of their entire discography because I do think it is a good album, and there are so many qualities about it that I do enjoy, and it was right on the cusp of getting an A, but after listening to it a few more times and comparing it to the other albums that I put in A tier, it ultimately did feel the most appropriate to put it in B, but that certainly does not negate all of the great elements to this record, and there are plenty of them. This was their first album in 10 years, and on the last couple of releases, we saw them branch out and take more chances with their sound, and on here we see more of a return to the sounds from the first half of their discography with the very spacey, floaty, atmospheric music that has very minimal drums drums and percussion, and a large emphasis on their orchestral backing band. And I do appreciate the fact that we get a return to that classic Sigur Rós sound, and after the pandemic and the toll that it took on so many people's mental health, I think it makes sense that an album like this would be welcomed with open arms by so many fans. And to me, I think about 75% of this album is great, but it does have a few tracks that don't resonate with me as much, and that's ultimately why I did put it in B tier. It's 10 tracks long, and my general feelings about this album is that tracks 1 through 4 are all incredibly strong, and in my opinion, that is the best part of the album. And then after that, it sort of alternates between a few tracks that I like and a few tracks that I would say are okay, but nothing special in the grand scheme of the Sigur Rós discography. And there is part of me that does miss some of the drums as well, and I think if there were maybe 1 or 2 songs that were a little more drum heavy and energetic, it might have offered a little more variety within the track listing and could have made things a bit more interesting, but that's just my personal stylistic preference. I will also say that none of the songs on here would make my top 10 favorite Sigur Rós song list, which was another reasoning for putting it in B tier, but at the same time, there are definitely some truly beautiful tracks on here that sound like that classic Sigur Rós sound, and I don't think this is a bad album by any stretch, especially being this far into their discography. As far as my favorite songs on here go, like I said, it's tracks 1 through 4, with my number 1 favorite probably being track 3, Shell, and then for the second half of the album, the standout tracks for me are Gold and Fall. So like I said, definitely not a bad album by any stretch, but for me, a lot of their other records do resonate with me more, so ultimately it felt most fitting to give this one a B. Alright, we did it. We went through their 8 studio albums, and this is what I came up with. This really is just such an incredible band with such a strong discography, and I really think they wrote some of the most unique and beautiful sounding music, and anybody who has not checked this band out, I think they are well worth exploring, and anybody who is a fan of more stretched out, post-rocky, ambient, chamber pop sorts of sounds, I cannot think of a better band to recommend than Sigur Rós, so do yourself the favor of checking them out if you have never heard of them. And who knows what the future holds for this group, but if they ever end up putting out any more records, I do not doubt that there will be some equally as beautiful tracks, just like there were on Átta. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was enjoyable. And if you're interested, please feel free to check out some of my other tier lists linked in the comments and the description and see if there's anything else that you might like. And please let me know your thoughts in the comments, where you agree and disagree and how you would rank these 8 albums. I would love to hear your thoughts. All right, that is it for today. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care.